experiments to see if they would work. And confession and denunciation meetings. And education was that. Nothing else was allowed, and a lot of books were burned and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so then you have the Gang of Four, all that kind of stuff. Mao Zedong's wife was one of those four that she would, I just really think that towards the end of both his wife's life and his life, they were a little crazy.
How could you stay stable after doing the kinds of things that they did to people?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's possible.
We have lots of friends that survived this though, and some of them would talk about it, and some we didn't know how to ask the right questions really, but they would share some of the experiences they had.
I'm sure they were so personal and deep. I just can't imagine how deep torture goes into the soul.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I could
Well,
stay firm as a soul
oh yeah.
in that kind of a...
On another occasion, if we have a dialogue, we can talk about the torture that went on in communist Russia, and Solzhenitsyn described the difference between good and evil in people. He says really good people did very evil things, and they were good people, but they got driven to a certain state and become survival and things like that, and they'll do anything. Some would do anything. Almost everybody would abandon their principles under duress, like that extreme duress.
So this-
but that's another
This one,
conversation.
look, Life and Death in Shanghai really describes the,
I'm gonna read that someday, I really am.
That's an outstanding book.
it describes what
Outstanding.
happens with that. Okay, so let's skip forward from the Cultural Revolution and say what happened in China that turned some of those things around. There are still some remnants. We, personally, I feel like the, in our own school where we taught, they would like to, they had faculty meetings where they would tear teachers up. They would say this person's doing this publicly. They would say this teacher's doing this and this teacher's doing that. And they would almost make it like the confessional kind of meeting like they had, and anyway, there's some of those things that are still there, but what really happened is the quote, what they call the opening up. Is that Hu Jintao? No, Deng Xiaoping.
Deng Xiaoping liberalized things and
Yeah.
gave people
Deng Xiaoping.
some freedom.
Deng Xiao. Am I right, Richard?
Ping or Pong, I don't know, one of them.
Deng
Ping Pong,
Xiaoping.
I don't know. Deng Xiaoping, yes.
Oh, is it P-E-N-G?
P-E-N-G, Deng Xiaoping. Close enough.
He was actually one of the advisors, or pretty close to Mao Zedong, but he went in and out of favor. He was exiled a couple of times and came back again. And then when he came back again, he realized that China needed to be part of the world. So he had an opening up, the liberalization of the tight control that they had. And this is when a lot of the things were restored, and some of their students could leave China and study abroad. So what year was that, Richard, the opening up?
Well, after Mao died, 78, 79, they started going.
Yeah. Opening up.
So do you think that this opening up caused the problems that they saw in Tiananmen Square, for example? That opening up, letting the students see the outside world and what was out there?
Well, the more people get a taste of freedom and liberty
The more
and
they-
free dialogue, the more they yearn for it, you know.
Right.
To have a well-established, like our freedom of expression or to assemble or freedom of religion. And
Because
they,
I can't imagine under Mao Zedong that any group of students would have ever taken to the streets. I mean,
Well,
this just wouldn't happen.
well,
what
they
they
did,
never-
but they were goaded on by the government so that they would be an instrument of the government to tear down the opposition to Mao. So he legitimized it, kind of,
Yeah,
by
the
letting
Red
him
Guard
run
and-
rampant.
Okay.
You had all sorts of
Yes.
pillaging.
It was so lack of justice.
Okay. But I don't remember, Tiananmen Square wasn't a destructive, what's the word I want?
It wasn't a rowdy riot.
Yeah, the students weren't rioting. They weren't being
They were
destructive.
just
They were
assembling,
making
making
yeah.
protests
a protest.
and demanding greater rights. And
But
so
I
forth.
can see how Mao Zedong would use mobs
Yeah,
Yeah,
to,
yeah.
to
yeah.
do his bidding.
There's- Yeah.
but
yeah.
Deng is the one that ordered the crackdown on Tiananmen Square, so
Yep.
he wasn't
Yeah.
willing to allow, and even today they wouldn't allow such a
Oh,
thing.
so
Right.
you don't know.
Right, but I think it was caused by that opening up that he allowed
Mhm.
Yeah.
because they saw that freedom. At least
Of
that
course,
would
you
be
know,
my.
but so much goes on in China that to even really figure out what happened at Tiananmen Square and what Mao Zedong is still revered in China. His picture is still up in Tiananmen Square, and people go to see his casket and stuff. They still do. And you think, why, when they had all this stuff, Cultural Revolution, all these different programs that he had, why do they still revere him?
Seems like the propaganda was powerful enough that enough people believed his powerfulness and what he said.
This
That
is
it's
still in the
trickled
hearts and
down.
minds of the people from that education of so many decades.
Yeah.
And the parents that still believed it probably have taught on to their children. It's still just,
So was it all
That's all
bad?
they, that,
Do you
but-
think,
but
do you think
that's
Mao
all-
Zedong's stuff was all bad? He
I don't know if I've ever read it's all bad.
advocated patriotism, love of your country.
you know what, that's interesting because I've been reading about, where have I been reading? Oh, it all blurs together. I've been reading somewhere about totalitarian, in The Road to Serfdom by Hayek, about how different values come out of different kinds of governments and different kinds of countries, and governments that are going to be totalitarian promote those kinds of values of patriotism and like nationalist values that are going to get people to be in that mindset.
Loyal.
And they really are good. Yeah, loyalty.
Yes.
It's all about being loyal.
And they are good values, but they get distorted in these different governments. And so it's interesting because it put the contrast to free governments and what people value there. And it's not that people in England and America don't value loyalty and patriotism necessarily, but they were focusing more on liberty and on expression and other values. And so that's interesting. That's a connection between China and Germany and other totalitarian governments.
So what principle are we talking here that Mao Zedong used actually for his own benefit? Well, I would think education. He took over the education system of the country for his own gain.
So that would not be a true principle that he was in harmony with. He was distorting.
Yeah.
What is the principle?
The
of
principle-
education?
What is education? I mean, education as
It's
a
one
word
of the
isn't
very
the
first
principle.
one. But it's one of the very first principles, isn't it?
Or at least it's a tool to learning the principles of liberty, is the liberal education.
Yes, you're right. That it's going to be free to allow, people are gonna have that.
And certainly not the conveyor belt education, where everybody's trained just for jobs and not for,
Well, not only not for
Thinking for
jobs, but
themselves.
philosophy. A whole philosophy.
Look, I found my book, finally.
Yay.
Wonder if I can find it in here.
Okay,
Yeah,
so,
there is one about the republic lasts when
Okay.
there's an opportunity for education.
So it actually comes up in principle 2, virtue and moral strength are required. And it says the founders looked to home, school, and church to teach virtue, and that's on page 54. Only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. But they took the virtue out, but left the loyalty there. And taught something different.
okay, so principle 23 says a free society cannot survive as a republic without a broad program of general education. So
Okay.
he narrowed the scope of education. And even sent a lot of the young people and professors out of the cities, out of the schools, sent them to the countryside to work. And we went and visited the countryside. How, why was that such punishment? Well, what